Right now, you know something no other animal on Earth fully understands. You know you're going to die. Not in a vague, distant way. You know it as a fact. You've known it since you were a child, and once you understood it, you couldn't unknow it. That awareness follows you everywhere, into hospitals, into funerals, into quiet moments at 3 a.m. when your brain decides to remind you. But here's what nobody ever asks. When did that start? Not when did you personally learn about death? When did the human brain first truly grasp it? When did one of your ancestors sit somewhere in the dark and realize for the very first time in the history of life on Earth that they were going to stop existing? The answer is stranger than you think, and it changes how you understand almost everything humans have ever done. Let's start with what the other animals know. A gazelle on the savannah runs from a lion. Fear, fast heartbeat, survival instinct. But the gazelle isn't thinking about next Tuesday. It isn't lying awake picturing its own skeleton. It responds to immediate danger and then forgets. A crow will react with alarm when it sees a dead crow on the ground. Researchers have documented this. Crows gather around their dead in what looks almost like a vigil. They go quiet. They pay attention. But neuroscientists who've studied this behavior believe the crow is reading a danger signal, not contemplating mortality. It sees death as a threat in the environment, not as a future appointment it has already made. Chimpanzees are closer. They've been observed carrying deceased infants for days, sometimes weeks. A mother will hold her dead baby, groom it, protect it from other animals. Grief, clearly. Recognition that something has changed. But even here, most researchers believe the chimp lacks the ability to connect that death to itself in the future tense. To think, that will happen to me. You did that. Somewhere in the last 300,000 years, the human brain crossed a line that no other brain had ever crossed. It pointed at death and said, "That is where I am going." The question is exactly when. Here's what the fossil record tells us. The earliest convincing evidence of deliberate burial comes from a site called Skhul Cave in Israel, dating to around 120,000 years ago. A human body had been placed in a grave, not abandoned, positioned. One individual had a boar jaw placed near their hands. That object wasn't food. It wasn't practical. It meant something. Someone believed that what they put in that grave still mattered to the person inside it. That's not just grief. That's a theory of the dead. An idea that the person who died was still, in some way, a person. But burial is only one signal. And it's a late one. Anthropologist Thomas Wynne and cognitive scientist Frederick Coolidge have argued that what they call extended working memory, the ability to hold abstract concepts like future death in mind and reason about them, emerged somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 years ago. This wasn't a sudden switch. It was a slow accumulation, more complex tools, more symbolic behavior, more evidence that the human brain was thinking about things that didn't exist yet. And death is the ultimate thing that doesn't exist yet. To understand why grasping death required a specific kind of brain, you need to understand what the concept actually demands. Death isn't something you can see. You see a body. You see stillness. But the idea of death, your own future non-existence, requires you to do several things simultaneously. You have to understand that you are a continuous self that exists through time. You have to project that self into the future. You have to then imagine that self ceasing to exist. And you have to hold that knowledge in mind even when death isn't immediately in front of you. No other animal does this. It requires what psychologists call episodic future thinking, the ability to mentally travel forward in time and experience events that haven't happened yet. And the research on this is clear. It's a uniquely human capability. It's also the same capability that lets you plan, set goals, make promises, and save money for retirement. You can't have the future without death. They come as a package. Psychologist Jesse Bering spent years studying what he called the mortality paradox. His argument was simple and devastating. The human brain evolved to simulate other minds, to imagine what other people are thinking and feeling. That's theory of mind. The problem is that when you try to simulate your own death, the simulation fails. You try to imagine not existing, and your brain keeps inserting a you into the picture, watching from somewhere, aware of the absence. The brain cannot fully compute its own non-existence. So when the first humans understood death, they immediately faced a cognitive crisis. They knew it was coming. They couldn't actually imagine it. And out of that gap, something extraordinary happened. They invented the afterlife. Not because anyone told them to, not because a religion handed it to them, but because the brain, confronted with the impossible fact of its own ending, defaulted to the only model it had: consciousness continuing. A version of you, somewhere, still thinking. The earliest evidence of afterlife belief is tangled up with burial. When you place objects in a grave, you're implying the dead person might still use them. When you position a body carefully, you're implying their comfort still matters. The Skhul Cave burial at 120,000 years ago is one data point. But there are others. A site in Shanidar Cave in Iraq showed a Neanderthal burial with what may have been flowers placed around the body, though this evidence has been contested for decades. Even if the flower interpretation doesn't hold, the body was placed. The positioning was intentional. Someone cared about the dead person in a way that went beyond simply removing a corpse from camp. And here's the thing about Neanderthals. They were not modern humans, but they were close. Brain size roughly comparable to ours. Complex social groups. Evidence of art ochre pigment used as body paint as early as 200,000 years ago. Some researchers now argue that the awareness of death may have predated modern Homo sapiens, that the cognitive leap happens somewhere in the broader lineage, not only in our branch, which would push the timeline back further, past 200,000 years, into a time before us. Think about what that means for the first individual who understood it. No religion yet, no philosophy, no one to explain it. Just a brain that had become complex enough to construct a model of the future, and a moment where that model included something unbearable. We don't know what that moment looked like. We can't. But we know the response. Because humans responded to death with the same instinct, they responded to everything they couldn't control. They created meaning around it. They ritualized it. They told stories about what came after. They buried their dead with care and objects and intention. They painted the walls of caves with images that were meant to outlast the painter. Psychologist Sheldon Solomon, along with Jeff Greenberg and Tom Pazzinski, spent decades developing what they called terror management theory. The central idea is this: awareness of death is so destabilizing to the human mind that civilization itself is partly a response to it. Culture, religion, legacy, the drive to create things that outlast us, all of it, at some level, is the mind trying to answer the question it raised when it first understood mortality. Their research showed that when people are reminded of their own death, they become more defensive of their worldview, more aggressive toward those who threaten it, and more driven to achieve things that feel permanent. Every pyramid, every cathedral, every book ever written, every child born and named after a grandparent, there is something in all of it that whispers, "I was here." That whisper started the moment the first human brain looked at death and understood. And the strange thing is this: that moment made everything else possible. The same brain that could project itself into a future death could project itself into a future harvest, a future winter, a future war. Planning, agriculture, architecture, medicine, all of it runs on the same cognitive engine, the ability to imagine what isn't here yet. Death was the first truly abstract idea your ancestors ever had. And in grasping it, they unlocked something that changed the species forever. You live with that knowledge every day. Most of the time, you push it aside. You have things to do. Your brain is very good at keeping the thought at a manageable distance. But occasionally, something brings it close. A funeral, a diagnosis, a quiet night where the thought arrives uninvited. And in that moment, you're doing something your ancestors did for the first time, somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 years ago. You're holding the knowledge of your own ending. You're sitting with it. And then, like them, you keep going. They didn't stop when they understood death. They started. And neither did you.